मैं भारतीय सैनिक हूं, मिशन की सफलता मेरा लक्ष्य है। हारूंगा नहीं, हटूंगा नहीं, मरते दम तक देशवासियों तुम्हारा साथ छोड़ूंगा नहीं।
Good evening and welcome to the special edition of We the People. This past week in Uttarakhand, we have seen a scale of unimaginable heroism by our men and women in uniform. Whether it is the army, the air force or officers of the ITBP, they have taken a personal hit in a bid to save the lives of now more than 1 lakh people. In fact, as we saw a Mi-17 chopper go down this week, 20 people died on that chopper just trying to save other lives. 5 belonging to the Air Force, 15 men of the ITBP. Accolades have poured in, tributes have poured in from across the country. But is this praise and recognition ephemeral? Is this a passing phase? On We the People today, we look at the heroes of Uttarakhand. Are these heroes recognized only in moments of crisis, when they step in and fill the gaps that the administration or the political establishment has failed to cover? In peacetime, in moments of no crisis, do they get the recognition that they deserve? Let me start with you, Air Vice Marshal Bahadur. You know, there was an honorary flying officer that me and my team met in Uttarakhand, and his story was quite interesting because he was 1 month away from retirement and he could have actually opted for a desk job, but he actually insisted that I want to be there, I want to be part of this evacuation and relief effort. And he ended by saying in an interview that he gave to my colleague Nitin Gokhale that he said, my message to the people of, and those associated with the Air Force is, don't worry, your recognition will come one day. And when I heard that, I found that so moving because it suggested in that statement that the recognition was not there. So as an Air Marshal, have you felt that the recognition that comes in moments of crisis like this one is not there at other moments?
I saw that piece which Nitin Gokhale did, and I saw the honorary flying officer. That is a spirit that is there in any person who dons a uniform, and the recognition comes when you do a job. And what he said was absolutely right. It will come. It comes automatically. What you say
does it come automatically though?
It's a feeling that comes from within. That am I recognized or not? Have I done my job? But thereafter, at some point of time, people do tend to forget, and that's what I think what you're hinting at. It is something that we as a society have to be aware of. The fact that the soldier does his duty, the airman, the naval sailor does his duty, and he and his family has to be looked after when the crisis is past.
But the question really on this program is that when the crisis is past, what exactly happens? Generally in Cardozo, your story is the stuff of legends. In the 1971 war, when you stepped on a landmine, you actually took your own kukri and you cut off your leg and you carried on with your job. And today we have seen, you know, so much written about you, but in real terms, for the average soldier, for the man and woman in uniform, and I include affiliated agencies of the paramilitary, the ITBP, everybody in this, does this sometimes feel like a thankless job?
Yes, Barka, it does. This is a very serious matter which the country needs to think about. When there's a crisis, when there's an earthquake, get the army. When there's a flood, get the army. When there's a child in a borehole in a well, get the army. When it's a question of pension, forget the army. That's what the situation is today. Also, people in uniform, we are a silent service. We don't talk. But that does not mean we do not think and we do not feel. And we think and feel very badly about, it's very kind of Air Marshal Bahadur to say recognition will come. I have my doubts about that.
Why? Why have you become
cynical?
Yes.
Because what happened in Uttarakhand just the other day I went to Nigambod Ghat the other day for a funeral. It was full of Air Force officers and men. Where was the defense minister? Why was he not there? It's a question of attitude. It's a question of indifference. It's a question of leadership. This country can be the best country in the world. It has every resource, human and as well as material. What it lacks is leadership.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned the defense minister, because this time I saw that in something similar to what the American presidents do, he actually wrote personal letters to the families of the Air Force officers who died. I don't actually know if that has been customary in the past, but it's a good beginning. It's a good beginning. But I do take your point that there's a sense among the services that this recognition is not always there.
That's right, ma'am.
And I want to get J.K. Sinha in. Mr. Sinha, you are here in wearing many different hats, because you're today a member of the National Disaster Management Authority. So you have a fine sense of what it's taken to actually get these relief operations off the ground in Uttarakhand. But you have previously served as the chief of both the CRPF and the ITBP. Now, this sentiment that you're hearing, you've heard it from the general, you've heard it from the Air Marshal. Let me ask you first, where would the civil administration have been in Uttarakhand without the ITBP, without the Air Force, without the Army? You know, because there is a sense that these agencies, these services are filling the gaps. They are filling up for the failures of other agencies, of other administrative organizations.
Barkha, the question is quite complex.
Yes.
When a disaster of such a magnitude takes place, it is almost impossible for the civil administration to cope with it, and that's when outside help is sent. When it is a smaller affair, the district administration can manage.
Yes.
But on the other hand, they should be prepared for disaster, which they are not doing for whatever reasons. There are enough directions, guidelines, and yet it is on the back burner till the disaster takes place.
Your own agency has been under a lot of scrutiny.
Yes,
NDMA,
I think
the CAG commenting on meetings that should have taken place, not taken place. There's sometimes a sense in the Army, the Air Force and the ITBP, and you've worn both hats, and that's why I ask you this, that we're actually stepping in for the failures of others. We're stepping in on this scale because the NDMA didn't do the job it should have done in the past.
I think, Barkha, the fact is completely different. The NDMA has done what it's supposed to do. The implementation part is not with the NDMA, and that is where the weak link is.
Yes.
And there needs to be more teeth for getting those things implemented. I mean, I can rattle off any number of things that we have already suggested which has not been put in place.
Yeah.
Many years have passed. It's still being examined first by the Deputy Secretary, Under Secretary, and then the Finance, and you can't take a decision.
So miles of red tape. I
don't know why this problem exists. The 13th Finance Commission has also given a lot of money for disaster preparedness, and yet 3 years have passed, hardly any amount has been spent.
Let me take this to
both at the state level as well as the central level.
Let me take this to TSR Subramanian. The question, sir, is that when we look at the place of men and women in uniform in our society, there is a deeply felt cynicism at times, as you're hearing from the general, and there is sometimes a deeply felt anger, and it expresses itself usually against the bureaucrat. And so today you and Shailaja here are in difficult positions on this program, because there is an outpouring of solidarity with the ITBP, with the Army, with the Air Force, but there's also a sense that when this passes, it's back to the rule of the Babu, that the Babu has the last word.
Barkha, there is no question. I'm not going to be defensive with the outpouring, because both Shailaja and I retired long back, at least retired much longer earlier than Shailaja. I feel myself as a citizen.
Yes.
And I feel the kind of pride that the nation feels now as to what has happened in Uttarakhand, how our armed forces have jumped in, men and women, under extraordinarily difficult circumstances, under a very difficult situation, they come in. But look at it in a larger perspective.
Yes.
If you see, take a poll in the country at any time, in any part of the world, the armed services will be number one in public rating. Do not underestimate the kind of feeling that people have. See, we are not so demonstrative, we are demonstrative only when the occasion comes, or births, funerals, disasters, etc.
Yes.
But you take a poll, and by the same token, you take a poll about the bureaucracy, you know where they would come in the public rating at any point of time. That's a penalty for not being in the forefront at the time of an emergency, at the time of, and the bureaucracy holds the sack for the huge failure of the political system.
Yes.
The disaster in Uttarakhand is, let me digress for a second. I was Chief Secretary in Uttar Pradesh in 1993. I got the orders against tremendous odds, no more construction in Mussoorie. You can't imagine the furor. I said half building construction should remain, half. Mulayam Singh was Chief Minister, and he said, I can't handle the pressure, there's so much pressure. I said, no sir, we have taken the decision, we should stick to it now. Today Mussoorie is alive because of that. Today Nainital is alive because of that. There has been reckless construction.
Yes.
Now this disaster should not have happened. At least if the major floods came, the disaster would have been 1/10 of what happened.
Yes.
I mean, after all, nature has its own fury. But we have allowed in the coastline in Konkan area, within 5 miles of the ocean you cannot construct. Here you are constructing on the river, with consequences not only there, downstream. I don't want to go into all that. One word sir about NDMA, please don't mistake me. Your job was 5 years before the disaster, and it is 5 years from now for the next disaster. It is going to happen somewhere. It may happen in Harsil, it may happen in Assam, it may happen wherever. Harsil is there. And with the kind of clout that you have, Government of India cannot continuously say, I gave instructions, you didn't do it. Planning Commission cannot say, I have given the money, there is poverty. It is their job to ensure that whatever they do is realistic, it will flow down, it will happen. And therefore, I think that this is a point where NDMA should keep quietly, not be in the limelight, and then do whatever they have to do over the next 5 years and do that. Last point, Barkha. The country has enormous love, regard, affection and respect for the armed services. Do not get fooled at all. Have you ever seen any newspaper, any movie, any skit? You are lampooning your Chief Minister, you are attacking your bureaucrats all over the place. Have you seen a single word at peacetime or wartime?
I will take that to the general, but I will allow J.K. Sinha to rebut briefly.
Sir, I would just like to
I just want to make
I would like to respond to that most humbly, that yes, we give directions. How do you ensure that the Chief Minister of that particular state does what he is supposed to do?
Prime Minister is your chief.
Yeah.
That is how you have to get things done. You cannot say, I have written the file like a bureaucrat.
Even the Prime Minister finds it difficult to get something implemented in many states.
Many things are difficult.
But as far as the implementation part is concerned, the NDMA has to get it done through the NEC.
My job is to tell you what to do, is your job to do it. I have heard this.
Sir, that in the next few months, everyone will be functioning because of the fact that people are facing, and we are standing up and saying that this is what the ground reality is.
But the point again comes back to General Cardozo is, we react only in crisis. And I want to pick up on what T.S.R. Subramaniam has said about this honor and this respect that men and women in uniform enjoy in our society. Yet we are seeing a commensurate shortfall of officers across forces. We are seeing it difficult. Everybody pays lip service to the fact that, oh, this is a great institution, but you do not have people lining up in the same numbers to join as they once did. General Cardozo, when you hear someone as senior as T.S.R. Subramaniam in this, when it comes to the bureaucracy, saying, don't get fooled, they enjoy all the respect, where do you believe that the bureaucracy or the political establishment has failed the soldier?
I'll give you a simple example, Barkha. The issue is the National War Memorial. 66 years have passed since independence.
Yeah.
The British created India Gate as a war memorial for World War I and the Afghan wars.
Yes.
When World War II took place, they did not have time to create a war memorial, but they did not forget. They made a war memorial in London. We have fought 5 wars since independence. We do not have a national war memorial. You talked about the American president. The American president, the Queen of England, the heads of state of every country, the heads of state pay homage to the war dead. Does the head of state of India pay homage to the war dead? He also happens to be the CNC of the armed forces. If not, why not? We are talking about recognition. We are talking about the Chief Minister of Delhi saying, today of course, the plans for the war memorial have been made and passed by no less an architect than Charles Correa, but nothing has moved. Why? And the Chief Minister of Delhi is saying that she wants the India Gate to be a place of amusement. Where do the people of Delhi have amusement? India Gate is the place. I am sorry. Recognition of the war dead. A country which does not pay homage to its war dead dishonors itself. So where is the recognition?
And actually it's been trapped again in miles of red tape for years. Gul Panag is somebody who's of course in a different profession from the military, but is the daughter of an army officer, and therefore you've grown up as a Fauji kid, as it were. When you hear Mr. Subramaniam saying that, listen, this is the one institution that in national polls enjoys all the honor, all the recognition, is that romance around the forge enough? Why are we hearing voices of cynicism today on this very program?
To begin with, Barkha, the important thing for all of us to understand here is that when someone joins the army, I think accolades is far on their mind. The idea is to do the deed is in action and not in seeking honor or recognition for what you do. And being an unsung hero is the story of a soldier's life since time immemorial.
It comes with it.
However, in ordinary circumstances, one shouldn't have to have a show like this to talk about issues like this. But seeing how this country, as the General has so articulately put forward, seeing how this nation, seeing how the collective, I don't want to be able to use the word bureaucracy, but seeing the kind of treatment that's been meted out to the armed forces, whether it's the issue of disability pensions, whether it's the issue of status vis-a-vis and progression charts vis-a-vis the IS or the IPS, or whether it's the issue of the personal combat kit of the soldier. The army, it appears, has been shortchanged, and if it is not brought up now, it will never be heard, because this is a moment when the public appears to be rallying for the soldier, of course, because he seems to be the savior. But let's not forget also that apart from protecting the territorial integrity of the nation, it is part of the army charter and mandate to give aid to civil authority. So remember, while the army does this, it's not charity. It is part of
the job.
It's part of, well, I wouldn't put it so harshly, but it is aid to civil authority is one of the core mandates of the armed forces.
But I'm glad you brought up the point of parity with the IAS and IPS and also the disability pension and progression. Shailaja Chandra, the one rank, one pension issue, or the fact that the military has often said we don't have representatives on the pay commissions. The Prime Minister now promising a separate pay commission that is still a few years away. Do you believe that these are the fault lines on which the bureaucrat becomes, the enemy is a harsh word to use, but the bureaucrat becomes an antagonist for somebody in
definitely the perceived enemy.
The perceived
they're not doing that.
Well, I'm in a very difficult position. I know there is a lot of emotional, not only sympathy, but well-deserved, I would say, feeling of veneration, honor, which has to be bestowed on the people who have done their work, not only in Uttarakhand, but in so many other walks of life, wherever the armed forces have come to assistance. I will take what Gul has just talked about. It is the 1861 Act which says that the civil administration will call in times of distress the army, and there is a very, very formal way of doing it. You can't ring up a general and say, please take over. There's no way. It has to be done very formally. I want to say that the fact that there is a structure to every society must not be forgotten. Every country has an army, it has a defense mechanism, it has a bureaucracy, it has a political executive, it has a parliament, it has judiciary. There are arms, and within that structure, everyone, there is no conscription here, everybody joins the service he wishes to, subject to competence, subject to whatever. If I were to try and join the armed forces, I would fail the physical test. There's no way. So I'm saying that people have taken, and just day before yesterday there was an advertisement for the armed forces for joining them. so many allowances are there already being declared for people to join, and it says we want men and women who are good, who have courage, who have integrity. It says right at the beginning. I would say that there is in a society a structure. You have chosen a vocation. You, having chosen that vocation to start any kind of, you might say, putting this service in this scale and that service in this scale, it does, because there are parities and relativities.
But should those parities and should that structure, and I want to put this to both you and Mr. Subramaniam and then move around the panel, should this structure be immovable? Should it never be changed? Should it never be challenged?
I would like to say that bureaucracy has in so many ways been apathetic, not just to the armed forces, for many things. I'm shocked to know that files can keep on tossing and excuses like the ones that we're hearing today can be given.
Yes.
How can it be done? I'm not taking a brief for the IAS or for anybody in the bureaucracy. It is shameful, whatever has happened, not only now, but the fact that this direction is less kind of a situation. But I would like to say that there are blocks,
there are rules and power structures built into the system.
You cannot disturb relativities just because there has been a disaster.
Mr. Subramaniam, on the points that I have raised, the pay commission, the one rank, one pension, the absence of a national, I prefer to call it a national military memorial, because sometimes, you know, then you get into the structure of how you define war. Conflict may not be, whatever, a memorial for the soldier. Now, Shailaja Chandra is making the argument that when you sign up to be part of any of these services, you know what you're signing up for. You have made that choice. Does that mean that should remain unchallenged?
No. It's a dynamic society. It's a society which is developing. Hopefully, we are moving forward.
Yeah.
Many things have happened in the last 50, 60 years. We expect to be a world beater in the top of the heap in the next 10 to 20 years.
Yes.
So things have to be dynamic. But Shailaja has a very key point here, that we cannot convert ourselves into, say, a kangaroo court or to a pay commission. There are relativities. This is a large country of continental proportions. This has got at least 1,000 cadres of different sorts, uniform, non-uniformed, of different sorts. So you have got to be very, very careful, and therefore you need experts to look at it sympathetically and very carefully.
But so shouldn't those experts also include people from the services?
Of course, yes. Of course,
That's what happens.
On the issue raised by the general and you pointed out, I think we had a discussion some time back. We do need a memorial, but don't forget that the kind of sacrifices being made by uniformed people, Naxalism, terrorism, it is unbelievable. The total number will be 10 to 20 times that are sacrifices made by the formal armed forces all over the country. You hear of 80 people dead, 50 people dead. You don't hear of 6 people dead every other day. You don't hear of
including everybody.
We have not sufficiently recognized the sacrifices made both by our uniformed people and by public servants. A martyr memorial. I am not too happy to think of a memorial for Chinese war. I don't think there's too much to remember there. I am not even sure that we want a memorial for Bangladesh war. There are obviously Pakistan war. Something hurts me to say Pakistan. We still have not solved the Pakistan problem militarily or socially. On the other hand, we have had martyrs, from uniformed martyrs who have given everything in life. They are not being recognized. We do need, right in the middle of the city, a major martyr memorial, and that I agree with you. The Prime Minister and the President, as much as he goes to Red Fort or to some other place, should go there every year and pay homage.
Okay, a martyr's memorial, a memorial of sacrifice. Hey Marshall, you wanted to come in there.
Yeah, I think we need to be intellectually honest. Let's be frank on it. And if somebody says that he's not aware of the files that get tossed around in the bureaucracy, I think he's not being honest. It's like this. For example, the Department of Ex-Servicemen. It was the website of the department says that idea came in 1986, that there should be within the MODR division. Finally, it says very proudly, in 2004 it was set up. It took 18 years for the Department of Ex-Servicemen to be set up. Then, so there is an issue of this bureaucracy which goes in, and I don't agree, sir, with you that don't want a memorial for the Chinese war. The Jawan was told to go and fight the Chinese. No, he's gone.
I'm not against it.
So the issue is,
we want a martyr memorial.
So
he's saying expand it beyond just the external wars that have been fought. Is what I'm understanding.
That's right. A life lost is a life lost, whether he is that of a policeman.
Exactly.
Or,
exactly.
Right. And he's
for the country.
You want to come in there, Gul, and then Mrs. Sinha, I have a
The issue
question.
of a war memorial is a very passionate one, but I think it's also time we looked at the alive, look at the way the disabled are treated. I mean, Navdeep is a lawyer who has worked in the Armed Forces Tribunal, and he battles continuously for disability pensions that are, from what one hears, being blocked by the Ministry of Defence. Now, a nation that doesn't treat its disabled soldiers is, I do not know what kind of a nation.
Major Navdeep, you have been as a lawyer looking at many of these cases where the dispute actually that the Ministry of Defence is expressing is how to define what is a war disability and what is a so-called routine disability. But what you have actually uncovered is how many disabled soldiers are actually in litigation in courts, which is the last place they should be.
Litigation they cannot afford.
Litigation they cannot afford.
You'll be surprised that maximum amount of cases, appeals and SLPs in the Supreme Court filed by the Ministry of Defence are against their own disabled soldiers. What Air Marshal was pointing out, the Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare, that's the biggest stumbling block. The problem is not with the political executive, the problem is not with the higher bureaucracy. The problem is the deep anti-veteran ethos inculcated in this Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare. File notings are made in a negative manner. Initials are affixed on those file notings. Ultimately, decisions are unilaterally imposed on military veterans, disabled veterans, war widows. On the civil side, the Department of Pensions and Pensioners Welfare, it's a highly sensitized department. They have a joint consultative machinery. All stakeholders are brought on the table. Issues are thrashed out. Issues are resolved properly, which functions under the Department of Pensions and Pensioners Welfare, which comes under the Personnel Ministry. And people are happy with it. Whereas the DESW, the Department of Ex-Servicemen Welfare, they are the biggest stumbling block. Every single case is challenged in the Supreme Court. Disabled soldiers, you'll be surprised that a non-service disabled person in the Army, Navy, Air Force, also in the Central Armed Police Forces, he or she, these people have no protection of service. While on the civil side, under the People with Disabilities Act, a Persons with Disabilities Act 1995 under Section 47, a person with a disability cannot be discharged from service. If he or she cannot be retained in that particular post, he or she would be shifted to a suitable post. If not, then kept on supernumerary strength. So paid full pay and allowances and paid pension thereafter. Whereas in the Forge and also in the Central Armed Police Services, Central Armed Police Forces, even if there's a non-service disability at home, on leave, anything, a person can be thrown out without any pay, without any allowances, without any pension, without any protection to his family. I mean, this nation has to be sensitive towards its uniformed personnel. It has to be the other way around. You have to be more liberal, soft with these people.
But this phrase that you use, the anti-veteran ethos, Mr. Subramaniam, is that the problem? Because the point is that...
when you
look at the other countries.
Supreme Court. No, I don't question the fact that he is saying I don't know anything about them. I don't want to comment on the facts. No, but Barka, 70% of cases in our Supreme Court relate to our civil servants. In our High Court, 80% relate to civil servants. I mean, I agree with you, we have got a terribly litigative kind of a system, but I can assure you there is no particular bias against A or B. It is a system which is crying for reform of every sort. I have advocated that we should now have these committees headed by retired senior officers, which should settle at the ministry level straight away immediately, and no government shall go on appeal.
These
committees are always headed by retired civil servants. Why don't you invite major generals, air marshals?
It should be final.
Again, the point is this is where the violence in society is so final. Every retirement committee is headed by a civil servant. Why not by an Air Force, Army or Navy?
Why not?
The question actually of the ethos is that there is no participation there is no participatory voice in key decisions.
But I am agreeing.
You're agreeing.
I am agreeing that the system is crying for reform. I'm agreeing.
But I wanted to look at this wider question of an ethos. That do we have a culture of respecting the soldier? How much lip service is paid to uniform personnel? But unlike in the West, where there are moments of silence, there is a more connection. There is a more organic connection with history, with the great battles, for example. I have here with me Alka Ahuja. Her husband was killed in the Kargil war. He was actually taken hostage by the Pakistanis and killed there. And Alka was a school teacher when this happened, written a very moving piece about this. Alka, you have sometimes said that you grew up knowing your military history. You read it in the textbooks, you understood it. But our children today don't necessarily know it. Even Kargil. You know, sometimes when I meet the young people in my office and I say, how old were you in 1999? And they'll say 5 or 4 or 11 or whatever. I don't know what they know.
They don't know anything. You talk to them, they don't even know what is Kargil war basically. They don't know the place, they don't know anything about. Leave aside Kargil war, 1971 war, any war which India has fought, they don't know anything about it. We are teaching them about the different countries, but they don't know about the own country, what is happening in our own country. And memorial, it should be there, but first I would request that they should be taught all these wars in the history itself.
Do you sometimes feel that your husband's story will not be recorded by history? Do you worry about that?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
Because
people have forgotten him.
You're saying that people have forgotten him already?
Yeah.
Aapko lagta hai aisa?
Yes. You ask the new generation now, the students who are sitting here, ask them, do they know about the Kargil war? Most of them will say no.
So how does that make someone like you, I mean, you know, it's not easy. Your husband dies in a war, and then you have to cope with the fact that you want that story to be marked somewhere in history, don't you?
It should be. It should be.
So I think that's what you're hearing. General Cardozo, you wanted to come in there, and then Mr. Sinha.
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes.
What Mrs. Ahuja has said.
Yes.
I think the basic issue is there are people who say that the armed forces are paid to do what they're supposed to do. I am sorry, I don't agree with that. We do what we do because of a simple word called love. Love may not be a very military word, but it is the army functions on love for the country, love for the people who serve under us, love for the people of India, love for a cause. And it is on the altar of love that we put our lives in the line of fire and disappear in the smoke and fire of battle. Therefore, the issue is, another issue was recognition and how the battle casualties are treated. When I lost my leg in 1971, I had 3 amputations. What did the government do? They put me on half pay.
Yes.
Why was I on half pay? Because I stayed in hospital for more than 6 months. It happened to Vijay Oberoi in 65 war. It happened to me in 71 and others. It happened in Kargil. Why? Because it is an attitude. With regard to Mr. Subramaniam, who says he wants a martyr's memorial, I am sorry. Every widow, every parent, every son and daughter of an armed person who dies in war wants a place where they can honor their war dead, a place where they can mourn them.
But he is not saying something different from you.
He wants
he just wants to expand this, and for it to be an inclusive space that includes the sacrifice of everybody.
I'm sorry, Barka. If you got a police war memorial, we need an armed forces war memorial where every soldier who dies, his name is on that brick.
Can I take this to Mrs. Sinha? Mrs. Sinha, I take this to you because here you have that peculiar advantage of having seen this as ITBP, CRPF. You've seen, now you're here, somewhere in what I'm hearing the general saying is, police ka alag or armed forces ka alag. Where would you come in on that?
You know, I have a perception about this issue.
Yeah.
Whenever it comes to giving amenities to the armed forces, it turns into a police versus army thing, which is totally absurd. And I would say that this yes, there should be a war memorial for the army, where people read, we gave out today for your tomorrow. You feel honored and you feel proud and you feel veer ras jo Hindi mein kahi jati hai, veer ras. That feeling, look at these people, they fought for us and they gave up their lives. That feeling is something very special, and that needs to be there. And there need not be a comparison between a police memorial or an army memorial. Yes, police memorial is equally important. It was not there, it had just been built, and that too also a lot of controversies came up. But I am totally for a memorial for the people who fought for India and not for British India.
Yeah, so this is an important point, and I want to understand a little bit, General Cardozo, why it has to be a separate memorial, because we spoke to Alka and it was her suffering. Now we're going to speak to Bimla ji, whose husband was with the ITBP. And he died in Jammu and Kashmir in 1998. And I can't imagine that there is any difference in the quality of suffering or the depth of suffering that Alka has experienced and that Bimla ji or her son sitting here have experienced. Bimla ji, यहाँ पे बातचीत हो रही है कि जो लोग हैं हमारे मेन एंड वेमेन इन यूनिफॉर्म जो कभी कॉन्फ्लिक्ट में मारे जाते हैं, जंग में मारे जाते हैं, उनको जो हमारा देश है कितना रिकॉग्निशन देता है, तो आपको इस बारे में क्या लगता है कि जो एक पहचान होनी चाहिए मेन एंड वेमेन इन यूनिफॉर्म की, वो मिलती है क्या?
बिल्कुल नहीं मिलती। जहाँ कोई पूछता ही नहीं है किसी को। मैं 15 साल हो गए हैं, पहले तो सब मिनिस्टर भी हर कोई कहता कि हम साथ हैं, ये है वो है, बाद में किसी ने बात तक नहीं पूछी कि कहाँ रहते हो, क्या है, कहाँ बच्चे हैं तुम्हारे, क्या है, कौन सा गांव है, कोई पूछता तक नहीं है। इवन इनके रेजिंग डे होते हैं उस पर भी हमें बुलाते हैं तो वहां बैठाने को भी जगह नहीं होती है इन लोगों के पास, अंदर तक बुलाने की जगह वो नहीं है।
तो आपको लगता है पहचान नहीं मिलती?
बिल्कुल नहीं पहचान है।
आपके बेटे यहाँ बैठे हुए हैं, you have seen your father die, and today there's this thing of whether there should be a separate memorial for the armed forces, separate for the police. Where would you come in on that, as someone whose father has died in the line of duty?
See, to be very honest, I don't think it makes any difference to us. The way the government has treated us, it really doesn't make any difference.
What do you feel the worst about?
See, we are unhappy because we have lost a very important part of our life, and that what matters us the most. I mean, other than that, I don't really see any attachment from my end or from my family's end towards military after he was gone, obviously.
Now, Gul, if you would come in briefly and then I have to take a break. What we're hearing here is everybody wants to honor a sacrifice, but there's a difference of whether you need to categorize that sacrifice or whether it can be a martyr's memorial, as Mr. Subramaniam says.
I think when you make the supreme sacrifice in the line of duty, whether you make it fighting insurgents or any other kind of enemy, it is a sacrifice you make, and each such sacrifice needs to be recognized and honored, whether it's a war memorial or whether it's a memorial for the fallen. But yes, fighting for India, fighting in line of duty, I think definitely deserves an acknowledgement.
All right, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we'll ask the General why then he feels differently about this. Also some of the key points of conflict with the bureaucracy. Shailaja Chandra saying you're signing up to do this. Is it that simple? Look at the conflicts in our country. Did we anticipate when we drew up the structure that this would be the role of our men and women in uniform? And also disability pensions, very important point raised by Navdeep. Coming back with your questions after a short break.
मैं भारतीय सैनिक हूं, मिशन की सफलता मेरा लक्ष्य है, हारूंगा नहीं, हटूंगा नहीं, मरते दम तक देशवासियों तुम्हारा साथ छोड़ूंगा नहीं।
On We the People, accolades pour in for the heroic work done by our men and women in uniform in Uttarakhand. But when this crisis passes, will anyone remember them? Before we return to our panel for last comments, let's get some questions from our audience. Yes.
Hi, my name is Shashank. I just want to ask one question. People say that, they have respect for the army. If you see the number of applicants who are applying for the exams for IAS or IPS, and you see the number of people who are giving the exams for the army, there's a huge difference. Today, there was a time when officers' kids used to join the army. Today, if you see the officers' kids themselves are they are all going out.
Are you a Fauji kid?
Yes, I'm a Fauji kid.
And would you join?
I'm joining in the next week.
So what made you do it?
I guess the love for the olive green, the uniform, seeing my father serve in that uniform. I am going to be a 4th generation also in my family, so I had nothing else to go.
Good for you. Good for you. The love for the olive green uniform. Let's take a question here. Yeah.
My question is, why does the government have to think before granting one rank, one pension to the army? Because if you see the soldier who served before 96 and the soldier who served before 2006, they are all facing the same inflation problems. They are all suffering from a fast-paced growth and growing prices.
Okay, hang on. Major Navdeep, from the government side, they actually think that they've cleared one rank, one pension.
No, it's not one rank, one pension at all.
Yeah.
What they've done is they've bridged the gap between pre-2006 and post-2006 retirees. The basic bogey that the government raises is, again, the lower bureaucracy, that even the civilians would ask for it. But let me put it this way. How can a civilian employee be compared with a defense employee? Number one, he retires at the age of 60, whereas a Fauji starts retiring at the age of 34 plus, remains on duty 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, lives under the shadow of the gun, remains away from his family for 10 months in a year. And even if you have to answer the nature's call, he has to take permission of
So
his
you
senior.
don't believe that what they've done actually meets the needs of the forces?
It largely bridges the gap, but OROP is also an emotive issue, and as she said, rightly said, that the price of dal and roti, dal and atta is the same for a person who retired.
Shailaja, this perception again and again that the low bureaucracy is blocking these...
I agree. I'm sure that there must be a fact. I would not even join issues, but I do want to say, when he gave some sort of, I would say, he said not the higher bureaucracy. Let me say that I was in the Ministry of Defence, and I remember the Defence Secretary sending for me. I was a mere director. He said, by this evening, we are going to give free rations to the armed forces everywhere.
That is correct.
Just a minute. That was unprecedented. It took 24 hours to make that note. I carried it to the Prime Minister's office because Defence Secretary said carry and get that order. Now it has been given even to armed forces in civilian, completely non-combat areas. Now these are things which show that the senior bureaucracy, let's not say all bureaucracy, senior bureaucracy, if it comes to their notice, they are not as impervious and as completely apathetic as is tried to be made.
Alright, General Cardozo, would you agree with that? That there have been, once again, Marshal, and to your point also, because so many people said a sacrifice is a sacrifice. Why does it have to be separate? After all, ITBP, for example, in Uttarakhand, has been as noble and as brave and lost as many people, actually more in that chopper crash than, as everybody else.
I agree with Mr. Sinha that we need to recognize valor, sacrifice, honor, duty wherever it comes from.
Yes.
Therefore, we need to have a police war memorial. We need to have a memorial for the paramilitary forces.
Why does it need to be separate, sir? In your opinion, why is it so important?
Because let's take any country in the world. You take Bangladesh. We went there last year with Gul Panak's father. There's a separate war memorial for the freedom fighters, separate for the army, separate for the police. Because we are different people fighting for the same cause in different ways. If the children of a war dead, a widow of a person who's died in battle, surely they need to go to a place where they can sit down and honor or think about the past.
Hey Marshal, do you agree? Does it need to be separate? I mean, I would be glad if just one national memorial that recognizes valor and sacrifice.
It has to be a very large memorial.
Yes.
Look at the number of people who have died in uniform for this country. So maybe for the pure reason for segregating and allowing individual homage, maybe there is a case for separation.
But we haven't even moved for, I think, for years, more years than I can count on one national memorial.
Yeah, and that's possibly what Mr. Sinha was bringing out, and he suggested a very wise thing was that don't make it a police and Fauji issue. It's not so, and that's possibly one of the games people play. And I see him nodding. The issue is like this. In a race, there is anybody who runs a race, we say, good, you ran the race, don't worry whether you're first, second or third. But when you put a stand, there is 1, 2 and 3. So I am not denigrating at all what the police people, the CRPF, the central paramilitary people do. But I think the people of this country, or of any country, have a special place in their heart for a person who wears the national uniform. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, whatever.
Yes, Mr. Subramanian?
So,
you want me to ask Mr. Sinha?
He may have more to say than me.
I was going to.
He may have more to say than me. And I think he's already said that.
But Mr.
Let's not make it an issue.
No, but from what I understood, Mr. Sinha, from what you were saying was that this is a needless division.
Yes, it is. But yet I think that it's a different group of people who would like to have a personal sort of thing for their I mean, not a general sort of
so, but we can't even get our act together on one.
Yes,
I can't imagine.
That is the sad part of the whole story.
Okay.
And the police, I mean, every state has its own state police. I mean, no one bothers about what are the sacrifices
they have done. So what I'm hearing actually is that every force is actually feeling undervalued. Every force is actually feeling undervalued, which is a sad bit. Let's take a question from this young girl here.
Good evening, ma'am. I'm Soumya. The case in point here, which I'd like to point out, is firstly that...
You were telling me in the break that you're also from a military background.
Yes, ma'am. My father's like the third generation in the army. He's been in and out of Kashmir for the past 12 years. But in this case, I want to directly ask Dikshit ma'am, our humble Chief Minister, who I have no doubts that, she has a very soft corner for the military forces. She quoted that...
What's your question?
My question is that telling the public that creating a war memorial at India Gate is taking away the sheen of the people's place. My exact question to her is, she sleeps very peacefully at night knowing that there is somebody guarding her.
I get your question. And Gul, I want to just come in on a larger point of the ethos, the phrase that Navdeep used about the ethos. There's something, it has to be more organic. The connection between society and the soldier has to be more organic than it is currently. Right now, if you're not from a background of a police or a central, of paramilitary or from the forge, you haven't had journalistic exposure, you actually don't understand anything. It's like two separate worlds.
Most people, when we engage in social media, we realize that a lot of people actually ask you, what does the army do in peacetime? And my simple question to them is, what are they doing in peacetime on Siachen? What are they doing at 20,000 plus foot plus posts in peacetime? So 1/3 of the army at any given point of time is deployed in one of these places which are by no standard any kind of comfort affording postings. That is one. The other issue of the ethos, and this young man also raised it very beautifully, and which is articulated by the gross shortage of officers across my father's course mates, 2, not even 2, 1, and we all are pretty much the same age. I don't think any have joined the army.
Yeah, and that tells us something. That really does tell us something. And
because
when you talk about free rations, how are we incentivizing more people coming in? I'm just going to take a question here.
Ma'am, the very fact that any class officer we take in the central government, the salary is the same. You join the defense or you join any of the other central government, but the very fact that the life risk, that parameter is not considered for the defense, it's not the same.
And really the issue of progression can't be ignored, Barkha. 20 years odd is what it takes you to get to a joint secretary level. The equivalent rank in the army is achieved in 30 years. And then that officer has to be subservient to an officer. I know there are different requirements, ma'am, and I accede to that point completely, that each organization has its own operation.
Nothing stops people from trying for the IAS. It doesn't mean that
you're glorifying the IAS as a better force. I beg to disagree. So it's not about that, because but if the status plays a very important part, ma'am, perks as well as how you're treated by society.
There's a very important reply to that. There's a very important
quickly, because we're running out of time.
Let's be very clear. And I am not trying to say that the army does not count. I cannot articulate better than what the former cabinet secretary did. I fully agree with him. We honor, we venerate, we respect. But let me come back to the fact that there is such a thing as a civil administration in a democracy.
But the question from the young girl was that the life risk factor is not the same.
No. But when you talk about status, you talk about recognition, public, what do they think? There is a resentment, there's almost a resentment. What is the civil bureaucrat?
There is.
What I'm saying is the bureaucrat may be a rascal, he may be useless, that's a different issue. He represents the civil administration which is being complete, you might
say. Okay, I'm going to park that for a second, last question here, and then we'll go to Mr. Subramanian.
It represents democracy.
Yes, go ahead.
And that cannot be forgotten. We are not ruled by military, we are not in a dictator kind of a country.
Right. Ma'am, my question is that if we're talking about veneration or recognition, it needs to come in a twofold manner. One is the emotional or the sentimental that we talk about, and second is the substantial or the position. So my question is, why is it that in NSA, the National Security Advisory, why isn't this body also comprising of, say, the chiefs of the armed forces who
retired officers
who basically have expertise in the area of security? Why is then a bureaucrat who takes this position and not an army?
Okay, I'm giving the last comments to Mr. Subramanian and then to General Cardozo. What we're hearing here is that resentment. You can't shy away from it. There is that resentment.
Well, there is, yes, but ultimately the people are the judge. This is a democracy and they have high, love and affection.
Yes.
One quick answer to Gul and one more comment.
Yes.
The percentage of children of IAS officers joining IAS is minuscule. I would bet it is lower than the percentage of officers of army officers, number one. Number two, I don't want to get mistaken now. I want to be very careful with the choice of words that I have. I am not making a comment, I am asking a question to myself. If I were the defense secretary, if I were the army chief, if I were the defense minister, will I, not for a public debate, not for everybody's consumption, will I privately ask myself, did I use the best technology in Uttarakhand?
Yeah.
Was my Bailey Bridge sufficiently strong, quick? Did it come sufficiently? Would the American or the Chinese army would have done better? Not for public debate, not for public consumption, not for criticism, but purely for me to improve that our people have been the best in the whole world. There is no comparison.
Yeah.
But are our equipment, is our thinking,
They're also letting down the soldiers.
like the NDA, sir, no respect meant, how what huge failure has been there. Should not a quiet private introspection, certainly not a subject for public debate, should it not be done? I would expect that if you have a ropeway, you should have 20 people going together, steel ropeway, not your rope which takes 10% to go across. Are we now using technology which is 50, 60 years old? Is this contemporary technology used by elsewhere? Purely
just because
as a private question, not for public debate.
And just because they're fantastically innovative doesn't mean that they should not be given better technology. Point taken. General Karan, got to end here. Very quickly, last word.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Subramaniam. I think this debate raises larger issues, and those issues are leadership,
yeah,
accountability. When talking about people not joining the armed forces, my battalion, we have 5 generations of soldiers. One of them got killed in Sri Lanka. He belonged to a family of 2 sons. The mother said, my family is linked with the armed forces. If my elder son has gone, please take my second son,
yeah,
because the link must not break. The last word, the country gets the army it deserves. You give us the attention we deserve, you will get the best army in the world. If you don't, you pay the price for it.
Actually, I would go so far and say that we already get better than what we deserve, and I think that is the point. And we acknowledge again the great work done by the ITBP, the Air Force, and the Army in Uttarakhand. You spoke about that mother who said her second son would join. We leave you tonight with the story of a young man in Bankura. His brother was killed in Jammu and Kashmir. His wife committed suicide the next day. That same day, he enrolled to join the Indian Army. I think nothing more needs to be said. We leave you tonight with that story and with the acknowledgement that this is a subject that needs more attention, even in the media, not just during crisis. Thank you very much.
बचपन से मेरा शौक ही था देश के लिए कुछ करूं। मेरा भाई के देख के ये काम सीखा। अभी जब ज्वाइन किया उसके बाद मैं वहाँ से खबर आया मेरा भाई अभी नहीं है, तो इस बात का मुझे बहुत तंग है। मेरा भाई भी अभी नहीं है, तो मैं बहुत अकेला हो गया। मेरे साथ कुछ हो जाएगा तो क्या होगा, मेरा पापा का देखभाल कौन करेगा, और मेरा पापा का आंसू पूछने वाला और कोई नहीं है। मैं अकेला हो गया पूरी तरफ से।